I think I understood what he was saying, but basically he asked me how I was going to use XML HTTP, and I don't know if he was talking about for my assignment or the one last like little mastery thing.
He's talking about in your final project. We're required to use all of the 13 topics in our project.
Yeah, he emailed me and asked me the same thing, and yeah, he did clarify he was talking about the final project with me.
I
Yeah,
have
he
no
asked me too.
idea.
I was going to use XML HTTP request.
I was asked if I will use any API in my project.
So what is everybody's project?
Gonna budgeting, some small budgeting application, and yeah, I'm not sure though in this cryptic answer that I think everybody got something cryptic. I'm not sure if it means that the project is accepted or not. That's the
I think his intention was to get us thinking about how can we use API, because he wants us to use API. So he's saying, start thinking about it, find a way to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna do a kids app that they can play with, like touch little characters and they animate and that sort of thing.
Okay.
My app is going to be like different calculators and how-tos for
I actually was
electrical.
going to drop the class. I dug myself kind of a hole, and last week was going to drop it before I went on Pioneer Trek, but I couldn't drop it because my bishop hadn't signed off on my ecclesiastical endorsement yet. So I emailed the professor and said, "Hey, here's where I'm at. I think I'm going to drop this class." And he actually, the instructor actually kind of talked me into sticking around. So my final project's going to be I volunteer for our county search and rescue, and I serve on the board, and I'm the logistics guy. And so, like, if things get broken, they are red tagged, they have to let me know. So I'm going to build an app that people can to use their phones to submit a service request, or where they can actually take a picture of what's broken and.
Cool.
Are you going to be able to turn in all your 13 topics on time?
Say that again.
I was wondering if you were going to be able to turn in the 13 topics.
You know what? He actually told me he would waive the due date for me, so that I could still turn them in while I'm working on my final project, which was kind of cool. So that was the biggest reason why I decided not to drop the class.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think the deadline was last night, wasn't it?
Yeah.
12 a.m. today. Yeah.
Yeah. That's good. That's nice of him.
Logan, would you say your project was calculators?
Well, it's gonna be different calculators for electrical work.
Oh,
because I work with electrical work, right? So things for like voltage drop over distance, derating, cable sizes, stuff like that.
Mine is a scorekeeping app for the game that my family likes to play called Shanghai Rummy.
Oh.
It'll calculate the scores.
Sounds cool.
It's needed because my mother makes arithmetic errors.
Oh, yeah, you got to keep.
I'll look over and be like, "Hey, that's not what you can't give me an extra 50 points."
Oh, that's funny. Well, it's okay if the error's in your favor, right? But
well, in that game, 0 is good scoring.
Oh,
more than that is bad. Yeah, it's like you want a low score.
So we have to use all of the topics in our final project as well?
Yes.
That's rough. I have no idea how I'm gonna.
I was a little stressed about it too, but he gave me some ideas, like using it when the game's over. You can use the HTTP request to pull a celebration image. Like, you win. So it doesn't have to be a super hard or elaborate thing.
Interesting. Yeah, I might end up grabbing images. I couldn't get images to work very easily with the HTTP request stuff. So I'm gonna have to brush up on that a little bit. I just grabbed stuff from that HTTP bin site.
Mm-hmm. So I guess we're gonna
Yeah.
have to learn.
I'd even try to get. So sorry, Larry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, it's okay. What were you saying?
No, I was just saying I'd even try to use images with the HTTP
Yeah.
request.
I didn't try that either. I've been actually working on my final project this week, and the hardest thing I'm having right now is figuring out how to create the player field for each person with DOM manipulation. I'm having a hard time with it because I need to be able to have them enter a name because it's going to be a variable number of players. So they have to be able to add a player, and then as they add the player, that player's score field pops up, and then they can add another one, and then they can take people away. I need to be able to do all that, and it's complicated.
Hey, I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to take a break for just 5 seconds. I have to go make sure my kids are sleeping. I'll be right back. Sorry.
Okay, okay.
Hey, I'm just gonna recommend, guys, if you use HTTP requests, if y'all need a server or something or a REST API, Firebase with Google, it's free and it's the one I always use for any project, and it's good. It's the one I use to complete my assignment too.
Does it let you post things?
Yes.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I did also answer to the instructor that, well, if I can use API, I want to use Firebase, and asked him if that is permitted, but he didn't answer anything. So I guess. But I asked him, can I use jQuery and Bootstrap? He said no.
Yeah. Yeah. I asked him before about jQuery before, and he told me no too.
Has anybody studied this? What is it called? Application shell thing?
Yeah, I'm trying to do that. It's like a learning process. I basically just saw it as a simple little HTML thing with minimal JavaScript, and then most of the script is in a different file. Is that what it's supposed to be? So I'm like,
well, it's kind of skeleton for application. Part of it is made specifically to support mobile devices and flexible resolution of the screen and stuff. But there is another part of it which is about the web workers. So these applications, in order to start faster and also can work offline and things like that, they use this caching mechanism implemented through web workers, and that kind of is a bit complex and actually doesn't work as expected, which is if you go through one of the tutorials in this application shell, then they will tell it, straight, this doesn't work unless you activate some special switch in your Chrome browser. You will have problems, but ask demanding from user to activate that on their browser in order to some feature to work is just like ridiculous. I don't know. Anyway, so this is going to be a bit of a problem. And also, we never studied in details for this course, but it looks like we're going to need it. The concept of single page application, or SPA. So has anybody come with a solution for the SPA? So your application is gonna have like 15, 20 pages maybe, or 10 or whatever. And so how are you going to organize it in order, to smoothly move from one screen to the next, but everything stays within a single page.
I haven't looked into that yet.
You know, he kept hinting the last few weeks about, hey, more to come on this, more to come on that concept, and I haven't seen anything from him saying, hey, okay, here's some guidance on what I'm looking for on the SPA.
I'm hoping that he's going to drop a whole bunch of helpful stuff now that we're starting our projects.
Yeah, I'm hoping
so
too.
Far. Like at the beginning of the semester, we had that one, what does they call it, office hours, and then he said there were going to be more, and then there weren't. I'm like, it would have been nice if there were, because then we could ask questions.
Yeah, every week I kept expecting another one, and we never had another one.
Yeah. Do we need to change the format of our group meetings now that we're going to be working on projects? Like, so we can talk about our projects and get help from the group?
Yeah, I assume that's how the group meetings are going to be from now on.
I think that would be helpful.
But in this case, we should approach it a bit differently. You know, like if you have any problem or question, yeah, maybe post it on the group forum or something like that, or send email to everybody so we can look into it and then discuss it on the meeting.
Okay, that makes sense. So people can look into it in advance. Are we still going to do our lessons today, even though everything was due?
Do we have assigned lessons? Oh man, I wasn't assigned anything, was I?
I don't know who was.
I have NAs on mine. On my schedule, I can talk about some stuff.
Michael, I think you had CSS animations because I have CSS transforms. And I was thinking that I don't know if I have something. I mean, I can talk about what I did, but I was thinking I don't know, if we wanted to go over it or what.
Well, I can go over stuff that I did. I didn't prepare anything because somehow on my schedule it says week 10 NA. But I have some copy and paste problems as well, so no problem. It's all already due, but I can talk about some things if you want.
Maybe it would help Brad while he's working on his stuff.
Sure.
Okay, yeah, let me check it out. I need to refresh myself because I did this a couple weeks ago. It won't take long though.
That's cool. I can go first if you want, Michael, and I'll just go over what I did for CSS transforms.
Excellent. That would be great.
All right, let me share a screen. All right, can y'all see my screen?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. I don't have a PowerPoint, but basically CSS transforms. I only did 2D transforms. And there in 2D transforms, there are basically 4 different transforms you can do. If you see this square right here in the middle, I have 3 of the transforms right here. And of course, you can rotate it, scale it, and skew it. Right, and I'm controlling it just using these little plus minus signs. But I also experimented using CSS animations. I think that ended up with a pretty cool result. And of course, for 3D transforms, you would just add in the 3rd dimension of Z, and you can have it rotate around in the 3rd dimension, or go back and forth, or scale in the 3rd dimension. And that's pretty neat too. And how to do it is really easy. I'm applying everything using JavaScript. But basically, right here is where it all happens right there. Basically, all I do is I add to my style sheet, I add to the transform attribute. I just have what the rotation is going to be, what the scale is going to be, and what the skew is going to be.
Hmm.
And the rotation is going to be a value between 0 and 360, corresponding to the degrees that I want it to rotate. The scale, of course, 0 being non-existent, 1 being 100%. And then, of course, after that, you can, a value of 2 would be 200%, 5 would be 500%. Skew is also is also in degrees too. And honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I'm not sure what the scale is between for skew, 0 and something. But other than that, it's pretty simple. Like I said, if you want to add in the third dimension, all you do is you add in a 3D transform, and you just add in the third dimension, rather than just having 2D. You can also do the fourth transform that you can do is called translate, and it basically just means moving it across the screen, right? And the value that you add to that is the amount that your object is going to move. And then they do have another attribute called matrix. But all matrix really is just adding all four different transforms into one nifty little one keyword, right? So you can do them all at the same time. Other than that, transforms are pretty simple. But especially when you add in 3D transforms, it can give you pretty cool effects too. So, any questions about transforms?
So looking at your on the on click, how much are you incrementing it? I didn't see that in your code real quick.
Okay, that's going to be down here. I named my little thing Bloop because I didn't want to think about a name for too hard.
Yeah.
So for rotate, it's rotating by 10 degrees at a time.
Okay.
It's scaling by 0.1 at a time, and it's skewing by 3 degrees at a time.
And just for information, Brad, you don't have to make it interactive like that. For mine, I just put it in elements and told them to have a transform. So when the page was loaded, they were already transformed.
I see.
It doesn't have to be quite so elaborate if you don't want to spend the time on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I also did have for a while I had a CSS animation going on, where it would basically just be a little square, like a little logo, just rotating in 2D space, and then have a set interval using JavaScript to keep it going. So it would keep rotating, and that was a pretty cool effect for a while. Then I came to this interactive one right here.
Okay, just a question. So since you have this square, which is kind of symmetrical, so if you rotate the square for 90 degrees, you will get the square. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and then continue. So if we put the transformation as well, transition within this, and set we want to rotate the square within 1 second, will you get the desired effect of being rotated?
Yeah.
Yeah, will it go through? Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I did that. I didn't do it with transitions. I did it with animations. But yeah, it did. That's the effect that I got for it.
I can show you some examples on mine too, because I just have it doing stuff where I use a little bit of combination of animation and transition, transform and stuff. So.
Okay.
Okay. Any more questions about transforms?
Good job.
So they're pretty straightforward. So stop sharing my screen now.
All right, let me share some stuff. Yeah, we'll share my entire screen. Cool. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
all sorts of fun stuff on there. So I will start with, we'll start with animation. So this is, I think I showed you guys this last week a little bit. This is my character. I did not make this sprite myself. I borrowed this from a up-res video game. But as you can see, she's blinking. So every once in a while she'll blink. When I click her, she'll start walking. And if I click her again, she'll stop. That's pretty much all she does. She goes back to her idle state. And so the way this is done is I go over here to my code, and basically I set up a div here that I just call Terra. That's the character's name. And up here in my CSS, I will give it a background and a size and width and all that sort of stuff. And then I add animations to it by, let me scroll down, adding to the class list. So I go class list, remove, that's basically me making sure that we remove the idle, and adding the walk, right? Or vice versa. If I want to click her and make her idle, then I remove walk and add idle. And then on load, she always just has idle, right? And so the idea there is, back up here, here's idle and walk. These are the classes that I add. And I attach, this is where I attach the animations. So can you guys see that? Yeah, okay. This is where so basically you'll have to name the animation, and that will associate it with an animation. And then I put the duration, the timing function. So all these attributes, then I put steps. It'll have 3. And it goes from, I want to say this is beginning to end. But I'll kind of go through this in a minute, and then how many times it will count through. So this just goes until it stops, right? And so since this references this, the keyframes, it just says what to do. And it says go from this area to this area. And I changed the background position from 0 to -576. And essentially, all that's doing is it's swapping, if you know what a sprite sheet is, it is swapping places on a sprite sheet. So this is my sprite sheet, right? So if you imagine an invisible box, your div, right, around this, I am essentially moving this frame to here and then to here, and then it's looping back. Does that make sense? And so I do that. Back to my code. That's essentially what this is saying. So it's saying spend 2 seconds on the first block, half a second on the second one, 2 seconds on the last one, and then repeat, right? And that is essentially sliding along from here to here on that sheet. And then the way I do walk is basically the same thing, except for to get it to look natural, I have 4 steps in this. So again, this is for how long you spend on each segment, how many steps it is, so it's 4 steps, and then the space that it moves on. So going back to my sprite sheet, that's this one's first, then this one, and this one, and then this one, right? So this just happens to be animating a character. It doesn't have to. You can animate all sorts of things. And so as an example, I use it here in my transforms. So basically, I do a very similar thing, except for I don't add or remove class lists because it's not one thing doing a bunch of stuff. It's one thing doing its thing. And I set up the keyframes. So here for rotate, and for some reason I did it backwards. But for rotate, I have an animation named rotate, which references here. Duration is 10, iteration count infinite. And so this image will rotate from 0% to 100%, from 0 degrees to -360. So basically it just spins, I believe, left to right. And then you can kind of set up whatever keyframes you want. And in this case, it's skewing. And then we have transforms down here. This will move it around. And this one changes the scale, and this one translates. So as an example, I can go back to my site and go to transforms. And so that's what's going on here, right? So this guy is moving around to the left over the course of 10 seconds, I want to say. And he has you can kind of see he'll get to the end and kind of slow down a little bit. That's the timing and where I set keyframes up. And then these guys will, this guy skews first left, and then he skews right. And this guy squishes, and then this guy's moving around kind of in a square. and that's all done with the keyframe stuff that I showed here, right? So this is saying scale 1:1, half to 1.5, etc. And then this just moves the area around.
What I found a problem with is if I stay with the single transformation, so let's say rotation or skewing, it's all fine. But if I want to chain them, I say, okay, rotate and skew, then translate, and then put it back. Then it kind of the states are overlapping each other. You know, like it's not like I want, for example, I have a, let's say, coin, and so I want to flip it along the x-axis and then along the y, along the z-axis at the end. And then it does not perform. It does some kind of optimization so that it calculates the final state and it arrives at that final state in the most optimal way, not in the way that I want it. You know, like, yeah, it figures out like I can arrive to this state faster if I, you know, reverse the rotation, something like that.
Oh, weird. Yeah, I mean, my guess, my non-expert opinion is probably that if you're going to use those sorts of transformations and animations and whatnot, that they're probably just going to be simple ones. And if you want to get crazy, you may want to actually have, like I did for this sprite, where you have like custom art that does it. Otherwise, yeah, I don't know if you always know what you're going to get. I assume that different browsers may calculate it differently and all sorts of weird stuff. Because I was trying to combine some for these as well, and it wasn't really coming out to what I wanted it to be. So, yeah, it's good to know though.
Yeah, I also found, I'm not sure how y'all were, you know, doing it, but if you like do it on separate lines of code, like you say, if you have like transform here, then transform here, then transform here,
yeah,
it's only going to go with the last transform that you list.
Oh,
it'll overwrite the other ones.
Do you know what happens if you add multiple? So the strategy that I was using was basically to add the classes. Do you know what happens if you add two classes at once?
No, I've never used two classes at once for transforms.
I haven't either. I was just kind of curious.
Yeah, but basically, so the way I had to do it is just adding it all in one line. So on one line, I had, you know, my transform, and then in the same line, I had the rotate, scale, and skew. Because if I had on three different lines, it would overwrite it, and it would just go with, it would only transform the skew. It would overwrite the other two.
Weird.
Yeah, there's something weird going on. Has anybody worked with opacity?
I did some opacity. Yeah, I want to say in this transitions one. Yeah, here I basically, so this is a menu that it's just the menu from here, and I fiddled around with it. But basically, it starts at 50% opacity in grayscale, something like that. And then when you hover over it, it transitions. I didn't use, so let me see if I can find that code to make sure I'm not crazy here. Yeah, so I just basically, it's a opacity, but I used link hover the pseudo classes and basically did this. So transitions worked really well with this, where I did the opacity over time and then the filter over time. And that just applies like a blur and a grayscale. So I felt like I could do more stuff here pretty easily. So normally it started with a half opacity, and then I made it full over a half second.
Because opacity is in a way, it is important for our projects, because for the one technique to achieve the screen switching between one screen and the other in single page application is you change opacity, and so that you have the the one which is currently visible with opacity 1, and everything else which you don't want to see is opacity 0.
Huh.
And so like a single page application becomes a task in opacity management, what is now 1 and what should be 0. And you can imagine like everything is overlapping, and like you have like 10 screens and you manage the opacity of one of them to be visible and the rest should be hidden.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious to see. So I changed the link to 0 opacity. We can just, hey, they're gone, and then they appear when you hover over them. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah. So that's what we are going to do in the SPA.
Yeah, ghost links. But yeah, that's what a lot of people do. I have an unfortunate time getting all of my stuff to stack when I do that that sort of thing. But because basically these things will have to be in the same spot. So
since we cannot use any server-side language, I think Larry asked the question and the answer from the instructor was no PHP, right?
Right.
Okay. So how do we then manage multiple screens? I mean, they can be rather complex, maybe each of them several hundred lines of code, and the script and the style sheets and whatnot. And imagine you have like 5 or 10 of those, and putting everything into single page, it's gonna be like 1,000-ish lines of code, which is kind of difficult to manage. So does anybody have a solution how to make a modules of something like a pluggable HTML parts, and you say, okay, now I want to show page 1, which is in file 1, and page 2, which is in file 2, and things like that. So
I mean,
yeah, Rajan, I would look at iframes. Look at the iframe tag. It used to just be the frame tag, but they stopped support of that in HTML5. So an iframe basically allows you to display an HTML page inside of an HTML page. So instead of having everything all on the same page, you can just have an iframe inside of your page, and you can just change what page you're displaying.
Yeah, but how do you exchange the information between iframes? Because each iframe is practically a separate browser environment. And so how do you exchange information between them? The iframe seems to be a little bit heavy for that. There is a technology called web components, which is not yet part of the HTML5 standards because standardization bodies are working on it, but the Google Chrome supports it. So has anybody studied the web components and how do we do that anyway?
I have not either.
I don't know.
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't gotten a chance to look at the final stuff yet. Like I came up with, I finished my assignments and then came up with what I was going to do, and I've had another class I've been trying to finish up a big part of it. So that was going to be this weekend.
Because this is the part which I'm missing from the course, like we studied here how to animate sprites and, transition from this to that. But the architecture of the overall application is kind of now very important, and we didn't have any lesson about this or any instructions or guidance or whatever.
I did discover this week that if you ask a very simple, broad question, that the instructor will give you a hint in what direction to go. So he doesn't respond quickly, but he does help a little bit.
Okay, let's keep him busy. I'll just send him the question.
I look forward to that answer because I have no idea. I was planning on using the add or remove class stuff that I did with my animations. but I don't know if that's a good, like, since I haven't tried it, I don't know if that's a good technique to use. So.
Okay, so let's do it that way. I mean, we might have question related to our projects for the next meeting, but let's also ask instructor something and then report on the answer for our next meeting. So what do you say?
Sounds good to me.
Okay. So
Ask
all
him
these
all sorts of questions.
Yeah, about architecture and things like that. So let's see.
Cool.
Okay.
Well, that's all I had to share. So.
Right.
Yeah. All right, you guys. Good luck.
Okay.
You too.
You too.
Let us
Good
know if you
night,
have any
guys.
questions.
Yeah.
Have a good night, everyone.
All right.
Okay.
Bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
All right, guys.